Well, this is the big story, and what a story it's turned out to be. Donald Trump is all set to return as the 47th president of the United States. He will become the first American president in 132 years to return to the White House after losing power. It's been a convincing victory for Trump, sealing the deal across all the key 7 swing states. A victorious Trump addressing supporters at Palm Beach in Florida, declaring a golden age for America. Trump was flanked by his running mate J.D. Vance, his family, including wife Melania, and his children. He's promised to fight for America and, in his words, fix everything. The mood, meanwhile, somber at a watch party organized by the Harris campaign. Kamala Harris yet to address supporters and concede defeat. The Republicans have managed to flip the Senate and take control. Republicans also look poised to take control of the U.S. Congress, which will put them in charge of both the executive and the legislature. In his victory speech, Trump singled out Elon Musk, saying a new star is born. Musk has been an early supporter of Trump's second bid for the White House. In fact, Trump has said Musk could join the government and lead what he calls the government's efficiency commission. According to Trump and Musk, the aim of the commission will be to cut red tape, shrink the size of government, and foster innovation. Trump also praised Robert Kennedy Jr., former Democrat, who abandoned his presidential bid and endorsed Trump. RFK Jr. is notorious for his conspiracy theories and anti-vaccine campaigns. Trump has promised to make him, and I quote, the health czar, putting him in charge of organizations like the CDC, which were at the forefront of fighting the COVID pandemic. Here's Donald Trump.
Welcome, President-elect Donald J. Trump, First Lady Melania Trump.
Our country has never seen before nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. I tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon. A few names like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he came in. And he's going to help make America healthy again. Leave the oil to me. We have more liquid gold, oil and gas. We have more liquid gold than any country in the world. We're going to help our country heal.
Well, a victorious Donald Trump there. And joining us now is Ambassador John Bolton, the former U.S. National Security Advisor. Also with us on the show, Tanvi Madan, Senior Fellow for Foreign Policy at the Center for Asia Policy Studies, Brookings Institution. Ambassador Bolton, Tanvi, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Ambassador Bolton, if I could start by asking you, I mean, we went into the final days of the election with pollsters saying this was going to be a nail-biting finish. It was going to be a cliffhanger. It's turned out to be a complete shock in favor of Donald Trump, a historic comeback with Trump returning to the White House as the 47th president of the United States. What do you believe worked for the Trump campaign?
Well, it was a solid victory, certainly in the Electoral College, but it was not a landslide, and it was within the polls' margins of error. I think I don't personally view Donald Trump as a conservative in the American political spectrum, but most Republicans do, and so do most Democrats. And I think the most important truth coming out of this election, when you look at Republicans taking control of the Senate and probably, not certain yet, probably keeping control of the House of Representatives, is America has always been, in contemporary times, a center-right country. And that's what reasserted itself here across the board. The Democrats under Biden had gone too far to the left. People wanted a safe pair of hands after Trump's first term, and that's not what they got. And I think they said pretty clearly yesterday and in the early voting before that they didn't want the excesses to the left they had seen in the Democrats. And despite a pretty competent campaign by Kamala Harris, I think the Democrats were rebuffed. It doesn't mean sweetness and light is about to follow. I think it's now going to be a very difficult 4 years under Trump, who will very likely govern the same way he governed in his first term.
Well, Ambassador Bolton, if I could get you to comment on the reactions that are coming in. I mean, world leaders have been tweeting, congratulating Donald Trump. Netanyahu was one of the first few who actually tweeted, calling this the greatest comeback. But this statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry, Ambassador Bolton, which has come in an unusual statement at that, saying the victory of Donald Trump in the presidential election and his return to the White House is a reflection of the disappointment of Americans. It also talks about an overpowering propaganda campaign which the Democrats had launched against Donald Trump. It talks about obvious internal and civil discord in the U.S. I mean, this sort of a statement coming in from Russia, what do you make of that, as well as what you believe the Trump administration's approach is now likely to be when it comes to dealing with Russia?
Well, I think the Kremlin is delighted that Trump won. I think that Putin, and I say this from experience, I first met Putin in October of 2001, shortly after 9/11. I've watched him in meetings with Trump and in phone conversations with Trump. I think Putin, former KGB agent that he is, thinks he knows exactly how to handle Trump with flattery and the like. And he looks forward to seeing his old friend, and I'm sure Trump looks forward to seeing him, all of which is going to mean, among other things, bad news for Ukraine. I think the same calculus is going on in Beijing. Can't wait to see when Xi Jinping makes his congratulatory call. They're lined up looking for the opportunity to try and take advantage of Trump, and he's just delighted at getting back together with his old friends. You know, Kim Jong-un, he once said of North Korea, he said, "We fell in love." So, you know, we can look forward to more of that.
Well, yes, I would imagine that we will see a lot more of that. But Ambassador Bolton, you said that Ukraine is going to be anxious with the return of Donald Trump to the White House. What do you realistically think the administration is likely to do when we talk about funding Ukraine, supporting Ukraine in this war against Russia? I mean, President-elect Trump has made it very clear that if he comes to office, he's going to ensure that the war ends immediately. And you also talked about Israel and China, but let's talk about Israel specifically. The view is that this is going to give Netanyahu an even freer hand in going after Hamas and Hezbollah.
Well, on Ukraine, I think Trump has said he would get Zelensky and Putin in a room together and they would solve the problem in 24 hours. That isn't going to happen. And I think the blame for that certainly won't fall on Trump. It never does. It would be Zelensky's fault to the benefit of Putin and the Russians. So it's something for those who are worried about the effect of Russia's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. This is not a happy development. In the Middle East, I think what Trump wants more than anything else, he said it on the campaign trail, is he wants the conflict there over. I think that's a large motivating factor in his view on Ukraine. He just wants these issues off the table. He thinks they're Biden's problem, and he doesn't want to deal with them. I think it was possible, and it now may be likely, that during the transition period, what is kind of unique, the long time between the election and inauguration of a second Trump term, that Netanyahu may take action, for example, against the Iranian nuclear program during the transition. A lot else could go on during the transition too, but that would be something I think Trump would like to see, because it may, in fact, contribute to getting the Middle East off the table before he takes office.
Right. Very important views, Ambassador Bolton. I'll request you to stay with us. Let me also get in Tanvi Madan at this stage. Tanvi, we know that Trump is transactional. We know he's unpredictable. We've dealt with him for 4 years. There have been challenges. There have been positives. But here you have a Trump administration which will have Elon Musk in some advisory role for sure. And considering that he's given more than $100 million to the Trump campaign, how will this mix of Donald Trump and Elon Musk augur for India, and what will India have to be prepared for?
We'll have to wait and see. I think India this time will be less surprised than it was the last time around. It's had some experience, as you mentioned. It adapted the previous time to Trump's transactionalism, to the unpredictability even. And I think even in terms of dealing with corporate backers of Trump, they engage with those they thought would be helpful. So I think in the specifics of Elon Musk's relationship with Donald Trump, let's wait and see how that plays out. It's close right now, but there can only be one star in the next Trump administration. And so let's see how sustainable that is. But I do think what you're going to see is India engage particularly with the president himself, his family. They will engage with cabinet members and others who are close to him, as they did in the previous administration. But I think they will also have to grapple with the fact that this is going to be a somewhat different second term. A president whose instincts, including on trade and immigration, which will affect India, have been validated in his mind, and he will have the Senate and potentially the House to push through even legislation that affects these issues.
Yes, important point that you make there, Tanvi. Let me take that across to Ambassador Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, let's talk about the transition as well as the transition team. And, we're given to understand that Howard Lutnick is the chief headhunter who's been putting things together to be better prepared this time around for the Trump administration when it takes office. What is the expectation on roles for the likes of Elon Musk, for RFK? I mean, we've heard what Mr. Trump had to say in his victory speech today. And on the crucial issues of cracking down on illegal immigration, on escalating the tariff wars, so to speak, that has the potential to destabilize the already fragile global economy. How do you think Trump is going to proceed on those campaign promises in actual execution?
Well, I think in terms of personnel, Trump, I feel very confident saying, has not made any decisions what positions are going to be available. And when somebody goes into the government under our system, for well or ill, you have to go through a lot of steps to divest assets that may pose a conflict of interest. You have to make very substantial disclosure of what your financial assets are. It may look a lot less attractive to be in the government if you're Elon Musk once he realizes all of these constraints. And, the system of cabinet departments is already under strain. And when you put people in the White House who have some undefined authority, you're looking for an even more incoherent style of government than Trump had in the first term. He doesn't really care about it because he has a limited appreciation of what the size of the government is, or what people do, or what his function could be if he really staffed it effectively. Whether they get off to a stumbling start this time, or whether it's smoother, I think that remains to be seen. I don't know what the answer to that will be. I do think that immigration will be one of his first major initiatives. They tried to do that in 2017. It didn't go well, likely. They'll be more prepared this time. And I think on trade, the threats that he's made, really, if they were put into practice, could crash the global economy. There's legal question about whether he has the authority that he apparently believes he have to impose these sweeping new tariffs, or whether legislation is required, which he probably would not be able to get. So I think that the chaos that has accompanied Trump through his campaign and through his first term in office is always the open question. Will we see it again? And I think we'll know soon enough in the transition.
Right. Tanvi, we've got a statement from the Hamas, which has sent out a message to Donald Trump stating, don't repeat Biden's mistake. Now, when it comes to India and the role that India has been playing in the Middle East and in the Russia-Ukraine war, one of non-intervention, do you think Donald Trump, in order to have a closer relationship with India, meet India's strategic objectives, will want India to give certain guarantees in the Middle East and in the Russia-Ukraine war?
I frankly don't think that when he's thinking about these issues, India will necessarily feature. But I do think India will be hoping that both those conflicts wind down. That has been India's hope. And they will hope that both the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as well as Ambassador Bolton said, that he doesn't want to fight these kind of wars. He doesn't want to see these kind of wars. He prefers trade wars to conventional wars. So there's an open question, especially I think on the Middle East. You could just as easily, because of the uncertainty in terms of his approach in the past, you could just as easily see him telling Bibi Netanyahu to wrap this up as you could giving him a free hand in the Middle East. So I think, the Trump administration worked with India on the Middle East. You saw the Abraham Accords benefiting India. So I think India will watch closely to see how it is affected by issues. But I don't think you're necessarily going to see some asks very significantly of India on these issues. I think these will be things a Trump administration will potentially deal with directly.
Ambassador Bolton, you know the man well. You said that you expect more of the same as far as the administration is concerned. But what about Donald Trump himself? I mean, he's gone through convictions. He's a convicted felon. In fact, there's a sentencing coming up in a few days from now. He was written off and, of course, has made this big comeback. What do you believe is likely to steer Donald Trump as he gets ready to take on the next 4 years?
Well, I think retribution against his enemies is going to be high on the list of things he wants to do. He's said it repeatedly during the campaign, political enemies within the Republican Party, within the Democratic Party, internationally. So that will be something that he spends a lot of time on. It's hard to know how not being subject to elections again will affect him, but that's one political guardrail that existed in his first term that doesn't now because of our constitutional prohibition on running for a third term. I think that will free him really from some of the constraints that he felt in the first term. Today, it's obviously he's not been sworn in yet, so his administration hasn't technically begun, but today is the best day of his second term as presidency. And it will just go downhill from now because as a lame duck, he has a much shorter runway than somebody coming in really to their first term as president. We haven't had experience with a separated presidency since Grover Cleveland in the 19th century, so that really doesn't apply. But I think what will dominate in people's minds is that he is a lame duck from day one. Senators, for example, elected last night will have 6-year terms. Their terms will expire after Trump leaves office. They're already, partially at least, in a post-Trump world. So this political dynamic will be relatively new for us, at least not in the last century. And I think it will contribute to disarray for Trump because he doesn't know how to deal with that kind of inevitable limitation.
Well, Tanvi, let's also focus a little bit on what must be going on in the Democrat camp this morning. We haven't heard from Kamala Harris just yet. As Ambassador Bolton said, that she did run a competent campaign and, of course, coming in at the very last minute. But what do you believe the Democrats got wrong in the way that they approached this election? I mean, the postmortem will happen, Tanvi, but what's your take?
I think the phrase that comes to mind is something Indian voters are familiar with over decades of Indian elections, anti-incumbency. If you look at the sheer numbers across, even in blue states where the gaps have been closed, and issues like the economy that come up, that culture wars might have actually been more resonant than people thought. But these issues, and especially the across-the-board closing of these gaps, even in blue states, will mean that Democrats will have to go back to the drawing board. There's also going to be, I suspect, some thinking about, how do you actually now go into the next at least 2 years where all control of government, including with, for example, the Supreme Court as it is, will not lie with you. And so I think, you will have there'll be a postmortem, but there will also be, I think, thinking about how to approach the next couple of years. I think you will see a generational change in the Democratic Party, which will be moved along. But I think there's going to be a lot of soul searching. And the other thing to keep in mind is the next 2 months, as Ambassador Bolton mentioned, this is a long transition period compared to other countries, both from a foreign policy perspective, but also in terms of finding ways to lock in some of the things that they've done over the last 4 years. I think that will be, at least within the Biden administration, something that they will be trying to do. But transition periods can be unstable depending on what other countries decide to do. But they might, so some of it will depend on their choice. But I think signals will be sent out from both sides as well. But I think this will really require an across-the-board soul-searching. There'll be people who said, well, what would have happened if there was another candidate, if Biden had run? I think these results show a more general a kind of backlash or rejection or repudiation and a desire for change.
Yes, a desire for change and anti-incumbency. You're absolutely right. Indian voters know that very well, and we've seen that playing out in the U.S. presidential election. But Mr. Bolton, let me end by asking you, did this verdict surprise you? Did this verdict shock you?
No, it's look, we've had difficulty with political opinion polling for a long time. And as I say, this is a clear victory for Trump, but it's not a landslide. It reflects the reality that America is a center-right country, and the Democrats didn't get that. They governed to the left during the Biden administration, and they suffered the consequences. It wasn't so much a verdict against Kamala Harris as it was against Joe Biden and 4 years of government that brought higher inflation, loss of control over the southern border, and an increase in crime. So, but really, back to basics for the Democrats means if you want to run as a left-wing party, you're certainly free to do so, but it means you're going to be out of government for a long time.
Tanvi and Ambassador Bolton, it's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18 with your take on the big day, the verdict coming in from the U.S. election. Donald Trump will head back to the White House, creating history after 132 years, making his way back to the White House. Appreciate you joining us here this evening.